Have you ever just looked up at that whole web of wires running between buildings and thought, what stops them from being, just everywhere? Well, it turns out there's this incredibly detailed, invisible set of rules that governs exactly where every single one of those lines can go. So let's get into this hidden world.
Right? I mean, why can't an electrician just take the shortest, most direct route from the pole to your house? Why do the wires always seem to snake around windows or hug certain parts of a roof? Well, the answer, as you can probably guess, is all about keeping us safe. And that safety comes from a super detailed rulebook that dictates every single move. It's designed with really just one main goal: to make sure nobody accidentally touches a live electrical wire. And this rulebook, it isn't some big secret. It's just something that, thankfully, most of us never have to think about. That rulebook is the National Electrical Code, or the NEC for short. It's pretty much the bedrock for electrical safety all across the country. And today, we're going to use its guidelines to take a little virtual tour around a building just to see the invisible safety zones it creates all around us.
Okay, so let's start our tour on the biggest, most common surface of any building, the roof. This is one of the most important areas the code has to deal with.
The very first number you need to burn into your brain is this one: 8 feet, 6 inches. It probably seems totally random, but believe me, it is the cornerstone of safety for any wires running overhead.
So what's the big deal with 8.5 feet? Well, the NEC says that overhead power lines have to be at least that high above any roof surface. This creates this essential buffer zone to keep anybody who might be on the roof, like a roofer or a chimney sweep, far, far away from those live wires.
And it gets even more detailed than that. This isn't just about straight-up vertical height. That 8-foot 6-inch clearance also has to be held for a full 3 feet out from the edge of the roof, in every direction. So what the code is really doing is creating this 3-dimensional safety bubble that just kind of floats over and around the entire roof line. Now, you might be thinking the NEC is just a bunch of rigid, inflexible rules. But it's actually a really smart document. It's designed to adapt to real-world situations, and it has these exceptions built right in for when the risk of something happening changes. Let's see how it does that.
And check this out. This is where you can really see the code's logic at play. The general rule is 8.5 feet, right? But look at the exception for steep roofs. If a roof has a decent pitch to it, at least 4 and 12, and we're talking about voltage under 300 volts, that clearance drops all the way down to just 3 feet. And why? Well, it's pretty simple. It's a lot harder for a person to just be hanging out or working on a really steep roof, so the risk of contact is way lower.
Okay, that makes sense for the main part of the roof. But what about those little overhangs right where the power line actually connects to your house? I mean, the wire has to get closer than 3 feet there, doesn't it?
Yep, exactly. And the code has a very specific exception for that exact scenario. The clearance can actually drop to just 18 inches. But, and this is a big but, it only works if all these conditions are met. The voltage has to be 300 volts or less, no more than 6 feet of wire can actually pass over that little bit of overhang, and it has to terminate at a proper approved support. It's a super practical rule for a situation that happens all the time. All right, so we've got the roof covered. Let's continue our little tour and move down to the sides of the building, because that safety bubble, it definitely doesn't stop at the roof line. The next key number to remember is 3 feet. This distance is basically the standard buffer zone for pretty much everything you'll find on the vertical surfaces of a building. So according to the code, those electrical conductors have to stay a full 3 feet away from a whole laundry list of things. We're talking windows that open, doors, porches, balconies, fire escapes, basically anywhere a person could be. But it also includes things you might not even think about, like chimneys, antennas, and even big signs on the side of a building. And the logic here? It's really simple and direct. The code sets up this 3-foot no-go zone to keep high-voltage wires safely out of arm's reach. It's what protects you from getting a nasty shock while doing something totally normal, like opening a window or just stepping out onto your balcony.
And the code's thinking doesn't just stop with the people who live in the building. For buildings that are over 3 stories tall, the NEC actually requires a clear zone of at least 6 feet right next to the building. And this isn't for the residents. It's to make sure that firefighters have a totally safe, clear path to get their ladders up in an emergency.
So as we start to wrap this up, let's zoom out for a second. We've looked at a bunch of specific numbers: 8.5 feet, 3 feet, 18 inches. But it's so important to really get the big picture here. When you see these numbers lined up like this, you can really start to visualize the different layers of protection the code is building. You've got this wide clearance over a flat roof, a specific zone for emergency ladders, and then a tighter clearance for lower risk areas. Each rule is totally tailored to a specific situation.
And really, this is the main thing to take away. These rules in the National Electrical Code, they aren't just random numbers somebody pulled out of a hat. They represent decades of experience and are so carefully calculated to prevent injuries and to save lives. They create this invisible shield of safety all around our homes and our workplaces.
So what's the bottom line here? Well, it's that this isn't just some random mess of wires up there. The NEC creates a really smart, risk-based safety buffer around our buildings. And from the roof all the way to the ground, these rules protect everybody, from the people inside to the first responders outside, all with the simple goal of preventing accidental contact with electricity.
The next time you look up at the power lines in your neighborhood, you'll see them in a whole new light, not as chaos, but as a carefully planned system. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other invisible codes and hidden rulebooks are out there, quietly shaping the world all around us?